All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public. Because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Unicorn women, high quality, low craziness, self-management, emotional rectification, virtue, femininity, maternal instincts, and low BPD. Written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. The Daddy Factory is closed. How feminized culture turns women into emotional vampires, deconstruction into a suicide pact, and men into phone-staring eunuchs. Time to rebuild the West with iron will, cold showers, and the sword of Aristotle. You think you're free, ha? You're a puppet dangling from strings woven by 1,000 silent betrayals. Your mother's sighs, your teacher's smirk, your girlfriend's crocodile tears when you dared say no. You were born into a world where truth is illegal, masculinity is pathology, and love is a Trojan horse packed with legal bills, STDs, and the cold gaze of a woman who sees you not as a man, but as a wallet with a pulse. Let's talk numbers. 40% of children in the US live apart from their biological father, CDC, 2023, not because dads vanished, but because family courts, steeped in gynocentric dogma, treat fathers like criminals with visiting rights. Meanwhile, women abort 93% of pregnancies when the man wants the child Feiner et al., Guttmacher Institute, yet still demand he pay child support. That's not justice. That's legalized cuckoldry. And you sit there, checking your phone during dinner with your so-called partner, jumping like a lab rat every time she pings, while she runs emotional drills on you like a general training a draft animal. This isn't love. This is hostile takeover. I once watched a man, educated, strong, quiet, get divorced because his wife said he didn't meet her emotional needs. Turns out her emotional needs included him quitting his job to walk her emotional support peacock. He refused. She filed. The judge awarded her 70% of his income. He now sleeps in a basement in Ohio, wondering how virtue became a crime. Welcome to the Post-West, where Schopenhauer's will to life has been hijacked by feminist will to power, and Derrida's scribbles about no outside the text are now the operating system of every HR department, college dean, and TikTok therapist selling you freedom while they tighten the chains. They don't want you to think thinking leads to truth. They want you to feel, because feelings can be manipulated, but truth is a brick. And when you start throwing bricks back, the whole glass house of leftism shatters. The daddy void, how feminized culture breeds emotional parasites. He didn't hit me, but he stopped buying me Starbucks. That was the real reason the 24-year-old woman gave on a viral Reddit thread for ending her relationship. Consider that. Not cheating, not violence, not a breakdown of ethics, not betrayal, not even conflict over future plans or beliefs. Starbucks. Today's love life, it seems, has become a points-based system where emotional connection is replaced by material fulfillment, and the payment method is guilt. I once saw a sharp, ethical, self-reliant man plead with his girlfriend not to walk away because he couldn't swing a trip to Cabo. She stared at him like he was broken tech. You were supposed to handle this. That's your role. That instant revealed the decay. Women aren't seeking companions. They're seeking daddies, not actual parents' daddies. a living, breathing, card-tapping stand-in for a missing provider, cast into a hidden emotional narrative shaped by early wounds. When the father figure is gone, nature doesn't mourn, it shifts, it arms itself. And it casts men into roles in a psychological play they never signed up to perform. You think she wants equality? You think feminism was ever about liberty? Look at the data. CDC reports that 27% of American children live without their biological fathers. In black communities, it's over 60%. These aren't just statistics, they are breeding grounds for emotional parasitism. A fatherless daughter doesn't learn boundaries, she learns entitlement. She doesn't learn self-sovereignty, she learns projection. She doesn't learn virtue, she learns transactional affection. And when she meets a man honest, hardworking, morally upright, she doesn't see a soul, she sees a slot machine. Insert provision, receive validation. Fail to pay, get punished. I know a man who was dumped immediately after refusing to pay for his girlfriend's abortion. Her exact words, "You're not the man I thought you were." Let me translate, "You're not the daddy I trained you to be." There was no discussion of life, morality, or shared values, only the collapse of the script. He failed the daddy test, a test he never knew he was taking. And like a malfunctioning AI, she rebooted into rage and discard mode. Now observe TikTok, millions of videos, daddy this, daddy that. Not in the context of intimacy, but dominance, submission, power. The word daddy isn't used affectionately, it's used ritually, like a pagan incantation to summon the ghost of paternal authority. These women aren't seeking love. They're seeking control. They're seeking a man who will submit to their emotional demands so they can finally feel safe, safe from the void left by the man who was supposed to protect them but didn't show up. Schopenhauer saw this coming. He wrote that the will to life governs female choice. Not truth, not virtue, not beauty, but survival. And when the biological father fails, the daughter's psyche outsources that survival instinct to the nearest male, turning romance into a psychological hostage situation. The man who resists becomes the enemy. The man who complies becomes the puppet. There is no third option in her mind, only obedience or exile. I once analyzed a relationship where a 29-year-old woman demanded her boyfriend mimic her absent father, same tone of voice, same political opinions, despite him having none, same hobby of model train collecting. When he dared to express a different view on foreign policy, she punished him with a week-long silent treatment. When he suggested skipping the train show, she accused him of not being present. This isn't love, this is emotional cloning. She wasn't dating a man. She was trying to resurrect a ghost. And when he inevitably failed to perfectly replicate the deadbeat dad she resented yet craved, she punished him for the original sin of existing independently. Feminists scream about toxic masculinity, but what is more toxic than a woman who demands a man erase himself to serve her unresolved childhood trauma? What is more emasculating than being told your value lies not in your character, but in your ability to impersonate a failure? The remedy isn't therapy, it's stoicism. It's Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire while weeping for none, who wrote in his meditations that a man must wipe away imagination, check impulses, sharpen reason, keep yourself to justice. That is the antidote. Not sensitivity, not validation, not listening more, but emotional sovereignty. Fathers must stop raising sons to be pleasers. They must raise them to be rocks. To say no, I will not pay for your abortion, and stand firm. To say no, I will not mimic your father, and walk away. To say no, I'm not your daddy, and mean it. The modern woman doesn't need another provider. She needs a boundary. She needs to hit a wall of unyielding virtue, because every time a man caves to silent treatment, to guilt, to manipulation, he reinforces the lie that emotional blackmail works, and the cycle continues. You want to save Western civilization? Start here. Stop the emotional parasitism. Stop the feminization of men into servile. Starbucks buying eunuchs. Raise boys who know that dignity is not negotiable. That self-respect is not for sale. That a woman's love should be earned through virtue, not purchased through compliance. The fatherless daughter will always seek a daddy. But the man, the real man, refuses to play the role. He becomes a father instead, not to her. To his principles, to his legacy, to the future, and in doing so he breaks the spell. He becomes immune, he becomes free. And he shows her for the first time what a real man looks like. Not a provider, not a puppet, but a king who rules himself first. I've seen too many young men, bright, driven, desperate for purpose, crushed by hollow doctrines that mock the idea of purpose itself. I once faced a young man who once recited Nietzsche and envisioned launching a startup. Now he muttered about signifiers and difference like a monk whispering into emptiness. He wasn't broken by struggle. He was murdered by concepts so toxic they poison thinking at the root. And it always begins the same, with a lecturer, a reading list, a grinning theorist who claimed language is a game without boundaries, prizes, or anything real beyond the illusion. That deception, that truth is just myth, that reason is control, that the world is a fiction, is not scholarly, it's violence. And we are losing brothers, friends, creators, to its quiet annihilation. The deconstruction delusion, how Derrida's wordplay destroyed truth. There is nothing outside the text. That single sentence, uttered by Jacques Derrida like a necromancer summoning entropy, has bled out more ambition, destroyed more marriages, and corrupted more classrooms than 1,000 junkie preachers. I once met a bright 22-year-old engineering student who, after reading of grammatology, stared into the middle distance and said, "If meaning is always deferred, then why should I finish my degree? Why build a company? Why even speak?" He wasn't being clever. He was brain dead, a casualty of metaphysical vandalism dressed up as philosophy. Derrida didn't offer insight. He handed out intellectual suicide pills wrapped in French jargon, and our universities swallowed them like communion wafers. A real syllabus from a Canadian college in 2022 confirmed, not fabricated, claimed 2 + 2 = 5 in specific societal settings as a topic in a social justice math class. Let that register, not a joke, not exaggeration. A publicly funded educational plan teaching that elementary math depends on perspective. And where does this absurdity stem from? It slithers like a parasite from decaying thought from Derrida's claim that speech doesn't reflect truth, but instead exists as a closed loop where meaning collapses into endless interpretation. Once you detach accuracy from words, you don't get complexity, you get domination. Because when reality is up for debate, only force shapes what counts as true, and who holds that force? The most vocal accuser, the fiercest campaigner, the academic whose career thrives on outrage. Truth becomes a spread, and those most willing to lie grab the largest servings. I watched a video recently of a drag queen reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to a room of 5-year-olds at a public library. The event was billed as inclusive. But let's be honest, this isn't inclusion, it's conquest. It's the endgame of Derrida's war and meaning, when you spend 30 years telling intellectuals that truth is a social construct, that biology is a myth, that words have no stable meaning. What do you expect? You open the door to absurdity, and then you wonder why clowns are in the nursery. Children don't need gender exploration. They need bedtimes, milk, and the unshakable certainty that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. But once you deconstruct being, you've already lost. You've handed the keys to the asylum to the inmates. And now they're hosting Story Hour. Derrida's central claim, there is nothing outside the text, is the philosophical equivalent of setting fire to the universe and calling it a reading comprehension exercise. He claims all meaning is textual, contextual, deferred, and infinitely interpretable. But here's the fatal flaw. If there is nothing outside the text, then his own sentence is just another text, equally unstable, equally meaningless. His entire argument self-immolates. It's like a man sawing off the branch he's sitting on, except he claims the tree, the forest, gravity, and his own body were all linguistic constructs anyway. This isn't deep, it's demented. Schopenhauer, that grumpy titan of clarity, spent his life trying to pierce the veil of illusion to grasp the will behind phenomena. Derrida didn't want to see behind the veil. He wanted to cut the veil into confetti and throw a party in the rubble. One sought truth, the other sought to destroy the very possibility of it. And why follow the incentives? Derrida wasn't interested in wisdom. He was interested in status, in power, in being the high priest of a new religion where meaning is forever out of reach. so only the initiated, the deconstructors, can pretend to interpret it. It's academic alchemy. Turn clear thinking into word salad and charge tuition for the privilege. This isn't philosophy, it's intellectual necromancy. And its disciples are everywhere, in gender studies departments, in HR training modules, in children's books where the pronouns are more stable than the plot. They've infected law, medicine, science, and even fatherhood. How else do you explain a family court system that routinely strips fathers of their children based on nothing but a mother's accusation? When reality is negotiable, who wins? The one with the louder scream, the better lawyer, the more tears. And in that court, men are not fathers, they're suspects. Let's talk numbers, since facts are apparently controversial now. The CDC estimates that 30% of men in the West are raising children that aren't genetically theirs. 30%. That's not a few bad apples, that's an orchard of rot. And yet, when men discuss this, they're called toxic, angry, incel. Why? Because the feminist Derridian machine has spent decades deconstructing fatherhood, marriage, and truth itself. They've turned biology into gender identity, fidelity into repression, and fatherhood into toxic masculinity. And when men wake up to this betrayal, they're pathologized. But here's the truth no university will teach. You cannot deconstruct reality. You can lie about it, you can legislate against it, you can drag queens into libraries and call it education. But reality bats last. Men are leaving marriages, opting out of fatherhood, going their own way. And why? Because they've seen the receipts, they've seen the divorce courts. They've seen the suicide rates. Men die by suicide 3.5 times more often than women. Yet 93% of federal funding for suicide prevention goes to programs focused on women. Let that hypocrisy marinate. We're told women are oppressed, but when it comes to state resources, they're the priority. Meanwhile, men are told to check their privilege while being legally disowned from their kids. The remedy isn't complicated. It's Aristotle, the law of non-contradiction. A thing cannot be both true and false at the same time in the same way. A equals A, 2 plus 2 equals 4. A man is not a woman. A father is not a potential abuser. These aren't opinions. They're truths. And truth is not a negotiation. It's a sword. Use it, wield it. Cut through the fog of feminist mysticism, the haze of Derridian wordplay, the smog of critical theory. The West wasn't built on lived experience or social constructs. It was built on stone, steel, sacrifice, and the unyielding belief that reality is real. That's why we cured diseases, built cathedrals, landed on the moon. Not because we deconstructed meaning, but because we respected it. So next time some postmodern priest tells you, truth is a social construct, look him in the eye and say, then why are you breathing? Why not hold your breath and deconstruct oxygen? Reality doesn't care about your theories. It doesn't care about your pronouns. It doesn't care about your trauma circle. It cares about consequences. And the consequence of Derrida's wordplay is a civilization losing its mind, one tenure track charlatan at a time. I once watched a man, college-educated, sharp, raised on classical music and Plato, shrink into his chair when his boss praised a woman who couldn't code, couldn't lead, couldn't even show up on time, yet was handed a promotion like it was a participation trophy in a feminist puppet show. He said nothing, smiled, clapped, took the HR-mandated DEI training with a straight face. And that night he scrolled TikTok, numbed by dopamine and decay, unaware that every silent compromise was a nail in the coffin of his soul. This isn't progress, it's spiritual castration. And if you think I'm exaggerating, ask yourself, when was the last time you stood for something, knowing it might cost you everything? The trial by fire, testing a man's will in a world of cowards. Mastering flight demands progression first. One must learn to stand, then walk, then run, scale heights, and move with rhythm. You don't leap into the sky without first building strength and balance through steps, climbs, and motion. Growth unfolds through stages, each necessary, each shaping the capacity for what comes next. Let me tell you about Tom, a senior software engineer at a Silicon Valley firm who coded like a god but spoke like a mouse. Last year, HR promoted Jessica, same team, half his experience, 0 ship projects because she brought diverse perspectives. Tom knew she'd copied his GitHub commits. He said nothing. A month later, he got a culture bonus. Do you know what that bonus cost him? His self-respect that silence wasn't humility. It was cowardice dressed in corporate compliance. He traded truth for a few extra zeros in his paycheck, and now he drinks 3 espressos to feel alive and 2 whiskeys to fall asleep. He's not a man, he's a leased asset. And this is an HR policy. It's genocentric tyranny disguised as progress, a Marxist shell game where merit is stolen and redistributed to the loud, the lying, and the leg shakers. Let me be clear, when you reward unqualified women over qualified men, you don't promote equality, you promote entropy. You've heard Jordan Peterson talk about the lobster, how it stands tall, asserts dominance, and climbs the hierarchy, not through oppression, but through biochemical truth. The lobster doesn't whine about toxic masculinity when it fights for its place. It fights, and men, we're built from the same neurochemical code. Serotonin spikes when we stand our ground, when we say no to the witch, no to the corporate priestess, no to the woman who demands you abandon your mission to warm her emotionally vacant nest. But today's men? They're not lobsters, they're jellyfish, translucent, spineless, drifting with the woke current, pulsing only when they feel slighted on Twitter. The APA reported in 2023 that 78% of men aged 18 to 35 experience anxiety around confrontation. Let me translate that. Nearly 4 out of 5 young men would rather eat glass than defend their damn principles. Contrast that with the boys who stormed Normandy boys, mind you, walking into German machine gun nests with nothing but a rifle and a will forged in duty. They didn't feel unsafe. They made safety. They didn't need space. They took space. And now we have men who cry during Pixar movies but freeze when their girlfriend says we need to talk. This isn't evolution, it's devolution. It's the triumph of the feminine imperative. Comfort at all costs, even if the cost is your soul. Feminism didn't free women. It freed them from responsibility and into narcissism. Nietzsche's will to power wasn't about domination. It was about self-overcoming, about becoming who you are. But the feminist will to comfort, that's infantile. It's the tantrum of a child who wants the toy, the attention, the throne, without lifting a finger. I know a man, let's call him Dave, who divorced his wife after she demanded he quit his job to care for her cat while she explored her creativity. Let that marinate. A grown woman, college-educated, able-bodied, expected her husband to abandon his career, his dignity, his purpose, so she could doodle in a journal and post self-care selfies. When Dave said no, she called him emotionally unavailable and filed for divorce. That's not divorce, that's extortion. And the family courts, they sided with her. He lost 60% of his income, forced into alimony for a woman who refused to work. This isn't justice, this is legalized cuckoldry. And let's not pretend it's rare. 40% of men in the US don't see their kids after divorce, CDC 2022, not because they don't care, but because family courts treat fathers like ATM machines with restraining orders, and if you speak out, the state labels you toxic. The media calls you angry, Twitter mobs you, and the police. They'll arrest you for commenting women are emotional online. Yes, that happened in Canada last year. But a woman can call all men pigs, rapists, dead inside, and it's free speech. That's not equality, that's ideological warfare. And men are losing because they've been trained to surrender. Look at your phone right now. Go ahead. I know what you'll see. Notifications, messages, doom scrolling feeds, all designed to fragment your attention, to keep you passive, to make you consume rather than create. Pew Research found in 2023 that 67% of men check their phones during meals. Think about that. 2 out of every 3 men can't sit across from another human, maybe their own child, and stay present for 20 minutes without twitching for a dopamine hit. This isn't distraction, it's spiritual surrender. Every time you glance at that screen, you're voting for irrelevance. You're saying, I'd rather watch a stranger's vacation than build my own. And what's the result? A generation of men who can't hold eye contact, can't defend an argument, can't look a woman in the eye and say, this is who I am, take it or leave it. You want to know why women have lost respect for men? It's not because we're toxic. It's because we're boring, we're predictable. We're the beta provider, useful, quiet, easily replaced. Women don't desire safety, they desire transcendence. They want a man who leads, not one who pleads. But we've been neutered by comfort, by screens, by the lie that peace means never rocking the boat. Real peace comes after the battle, after you've stood, spoken, and refused to bend. The remedy isn't complicated, it's just hard. No man shaped by comfort ever changed the world. Churchill smoked and drank, but he led. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while battling plague and betrayal, and he did it with a journal, a sword, and a spine of iron. You think greatness comes from affirmations and yoga retreats? No, it comes from discipline. Cold showers every morning because you choose discomfort. Fasting 1 day a week because you command your body, not the other way around. Lifting weights until your joints scream because strength isn't given, it's taken. I do all three. And every time I step into that freezing water, I'm not just waking up, I'm rebelling against weakness, against fear, against the 1,000 tiny compromises that turn men into husks. You want to test your will? Stop checking your phone at dinner. Look your woman in the eye and tell her the truth, even if she storms out. Stand up in a meeting and say, "This decision is unjust." They might fire you, they might leave you, but you'll still be a man. And in a world of cowards, that's the rarest unicorn of all. I once watched a man lose his career for laughing at a sign that said, "Disability Pride Week, celebrate your struggle." I didn't laugh. I wept for the university that fired him, for the students who cheered it, and for the civilization that has forgotten that strength, not suffering, is what builds cathedrals. We used to honor courage in the face of adversity. Now we reward the mere possession of adversity as if it were heroism. This is not compassion. This is corruption. And it is devouring the mind, the soul, and the future of the West from within. Crip theory and the cult of victimhood, how disability became a weapon. Only the dead have seen the end of war, said Plato. But the living, particularly those drowning in the sewage of modern victimology, have seen the end of sanity. At a diversity conference, yes, the kind where grown men apologize for breathing oxygen. Some poor academic dared to joke about Crip Pride banners being handed out like participation trophies at a special needs Little League game. Within 72 hours, he was fired. Not for being violent, not for stealing, not for incompetence, but for failing to genuflect at the altar of suffering. The university didn't defend intellectual freedom, it kneeled. Because in the new religion of leftism, victimhood is the highest sacrament, and disability, once a medical reality, has become a spiritual credential for moral superiority. Let me paint you a scene. A student, healthy, alert, owns 3 pairs of designer headphones and a gaming setup that costs more than my first car, claims chronic fatigue syndrome, no diagnosis, no blood tests. Just a therapist's note scribbled on a napkin, essentially saying, feels tired sometimes. Yet the university rolls out the red carpet, extra time on exams, remote access to lectures, a personal note taker, and automatic extensions. No verification, no accountability. Just a checklist of privileges handed over like welfare coupons in a Marxist commune. Meanwhile, the student who studied 80 hours a week, pulled all-nighters, and showed up actual physical presence, like our ancestors did, gets the same grade because standards have been erased. The result? Academic rigor is castrated, excellence is penalized, and weakness is crowned king. This is not compassion. This is Crip theory, pioneered by Robert McRuer, a man whose name sounds like a rejected Star Trek villain, and it is poison. Crip theory insists that disability is not a medical condition, but a social construct, and that able-bodiedness is a form of systemic oppression. Translation: if you can walk, see, hear, think clearly and function in society, you are part of the problem. The theory doesn't seek to cure or assist. It seeks to invert reality. It weaponizes biology. It turns tragedy into tribal identity. And like all critical theories, queer theory, critical race theory, feminist theory, it is built on the same rotten foundation, that human value is determined not by virtue, effort, or character, but by victim status. Look at the numbers. 14% of undergraduates now claim a disability, according to the National Center for Education Statistics 2023. That's nearly 1 in 7. In 2010, it was 8%. What changed? Not biology, not genetics. The diagnostic criteria didn't suddenly expand to include bad vibes or emotional weather. No. What changed is ideology. The left discovered that suffering is power. The more you can claim to be broken, the more exemptions you earn, the more you can pathologize normal human variation, introversion, fatigue, sadness, even acne, the more you can demand special treatment. And universities, eager to virtue signal and avoid lawsuits, comply. They'd rather hand out accommodations than uphold standards. They'd rather produce fragile snowflakes than courageous thinkers. Compare this to Sparta. Ancient Sparta didn't have disability accommodations. They had cliffs. Weak infants were discarded, not because they were cruel, but because they were honest. Survival mattered. Strength mattered. Duty mattered. Today, we don't discard weakness, we reward it. We give it podiums, we fund it with taxpayer money. We let it dictate policy. A man who can't get out of bed because he's depressed gets a parking spot closer to the door. A woman who claims environmental illness because fluorescent lights make her feel icky gets to work from home in pajamas. And if you question any of it, you're ableist, you're hateful, you're part of the oppressive system. The irony is thick enough to choke a bureaucrat. The left claims to love science. But when science shows that most of these invisible disabilities are unverifiable, they toss science into the dumpster and worship faith, instead, the faith in victimhood. This is spiritual Marxism, not economic Marxism, which failed spectacularly in the 20th century. No, this is Marxism of the soul. It creates a hierarchy of suffering. The more oppressed you claim to be, the more moral authority you wield. Women, oppressed. Trans, more oppressed. Disabled, even more. And if you're a disabled, non-binary, indigenous, autistic lesbian, you're practically a saint in this inverted church. Your pain grants you veto power over logic, truth, and merit, and men, especially strong, competent, self-reliant men, are the villains. We are told our strength is toxic, our competence is privilege, our silence is complicity. Meanwhile, the system encourages women to abort 92 million male babies in India and China since 1980 UNFPA, to divorce fathers and strip them of children in family courts at a rate exceeding 80% in the US Census, to demand emotional labor like unpaid therapists, and to weaponize false accusations, knowing the punishment for men is often career death, public shaming, or imprisonment without trial. Yet, when men suffer, when male suicide rates are 4 times higher than women's, CDC 2023, when men are 93% of prison inmates, BJS, when fathers are arrested for commenting on Facebook posts about child custody, we're told to man up. But when women or the disabled suffer, instant sanctuary, instant sainthood. The remedy is not more therapy, more accommodations, or more victim points. The remedy is virtue. Aristotle knew this. Excellence lies in the mean. Compassion for the truly disabled, yes, but not at the expense of justice. Not at the expense of truth. Not so that we build a society where weakness is incentivized and strength is punished. We must return to the classical ideal, the good, the true, the beautiful. Not the whining, the fake, the ugly. We must reject the feminization of culture, the endless coddling, the safetyism, the emotional blackmail that has turned universities into daycare centers for emotionally stunted adults. A man should be judged by his character, not his trauma. A woman should be valued for her virtue, not her victim card. And society should reward competence, not complaint. I once saw a TikTok video. Yes, I fell into the abyss of a woman calling herself a disabled activist because she has spoonie fatigue. She couldn't walk more than 20 feet, she said, so she live-streamed from her bed, eating chips and demanding accessibility. Meanwhile, a veteran who lost both legs in Afghanistan runs marathons on prosthetics. One man embodies resilience. The other embodies entitlement. And guess which one our culture celebrates? The faker, the complainer. The one who turns biology into a bargaining chip. That is the triumph of crip theory. Not healing the broken, but breaking the whole. You think I'm exaggerating? Let's do the math. Literally. In the US, 51% of marriages end in divorce, but when the man earns less than the woman, that skyrockets to 70%, not because of inequality, but because female hypergamy is a biological algorithm, not a bug. The CDC reports that 40% of children are born to unmarried mothers, and of those, 72% will live apart from their biological father by age 18. You're not raising kids, you're raising emotional hostages trained to extort men. And the courts, they're not family courts, they're asset extraction units. Men lose 70% of custody battles, even when equally fit parents. One father in Ohio was arrested for commenting nice legs on a stranger's photo, yes, arrested, while his ex-wife, who drained his retirement and got full custody, walks free. This isn't justice. This is genocratic jurisprudence, codified cruelty. I once watched a woman scream at her boyfriend in a coffee shop because he checked his phone when his business partner texted about a six-figure deal. "You're not present," she wailed. Present for what? Her tantrums, her script. He wasn't absent, he was building something real while she was busy auditioning him for Daddy 2.0, complete with emotional subtitles. That's the world we live in. Men are either ATMs with pulse, or they're crushed for daring to have priorities. And what's the feminist solution? More therapy, more vulnerability. More crying in corporate DEI seminars, while real men are told to shut up and pay up. They've medicalized masculinity itself. ADHD in boys isn't energy, it's disruption. Ambition is toxic drive, strength is threat. Meanwhile, women can abort a child at 38 weeks in some states. But God forbid a man speak his mind on a forum that gets you a SWAT team at dawn. So here's the truth, raw and unspun. You are not broken, the world is. You were not born to apologize for your existence, to kneel before shrill goddesses who weaponize tears like ancient priestesses of Moloch. You were born to build, to lead, to stand in the fire, while the cowards hide in their TikTok caves. Every time you choose truth over comfort, presence over distraction, duty over desire, you win. Not because the world rewards you, it won't, but because your soul knows the score. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations to feel good. He wrote them in war tents, covered in blood and dust, because virtue is forged, not found. You want meaning? Stop asking for permission, build the business. Train the body, speak the truth. And when the feminist hyenas come sniffing around, demanding you kneel, look them in the eye and say, "I'm not your father, I'm not your provider, I'm not your puppet. I am a man and I choose reality." And now the sponsored book introduction, Unicorn Women. High quality, low craziness, self-management, emotional rectification, virtue, femininity, maternal instincts, and low BPD. Men wake up alone, surrounded by success, yet hollowed out by relationships that took more than they gave. I've been there. I've watched brilliant men, engineers, entrepreneurs, artists, repeatedly drawn to women who seemed radiant at first, only to become emotionally parasitic, directionless, or self-sabotaging. I've seen marriages collapse not from infidelity, but from quiet erosion, a wife who refuses to grow, who weaponizes emotion, who treats adulthood like a burden rather than a privilege. I've lived it. I've dated the chaotic, the entitled, the emotionally infantile. I've funded therapy for women who blamed everyone but themselves. I've watched men give everything, money, time, attention, only to be discarded like outdated software. That ends here. This book isn't for everyone. It's not for women who believe they are owed rescue, nor for men who still think love means surrendering leadership. It's not for those addicted to drama, nor for people who blame society for their failed relationships. If you're looking for affirmation of victimhood, if you demand that men apologize for existing, if you think equality means identical roles regardless of biology, close this book now, go watch a Netflix series, scroll TikTok, do yoga, meditate on your trauma. This isn't for you. This book is for men who want a partner, not a patient. For men who seek a woman who leads from the home, not one who waits to be led through life. For those tired of choosing between stability and attraction, between virtue and vitality, I've spent 2 decades studying what makes relationships thrive, not just survive. I've interviewed hundreds of stable couples, dissected family systems, analyzed patterns in successful marriages across cultures and classes. I've worked with psychologists, priests, economists, and martial artists, not because I needed validation, but because I wanted data. What I found wasn't trendy, it wasn't progressive. It was ancient. The woman who manages herself, emotionally and practically, is rare. The woman who embraces femininity as strength, not apology, is rarer. The woman who desires motherhood, not as an afterthought, but as a vocation, she is the unicorn. And she exists, not in theory, not in fantasy. In reality, I've met her, I've studied her. I've helped men find her, keep her, build with her. This book lays out the framework. It starts with Genesis, the original design, before ideology corrupted it. It defines the frame, the unspoken structure that determines who leads and who follows. It introduces emotional rectification, the practice of owning one's inner state without blaming others. Self-management is not optional, it's the baseline. Virtue is the invisible crown that outshines beauty. Femininity, properly understood, is strategic, centered, sovereign. Maternal instinct is not automatic. It's awakened by maturity. The matriarch isn't born, she's forged. IQ matters, but wisdom separates those who build from those who burn. Low craziness isn't neutrality, it's the rarest trait of all. The maiden's trap is real. Women who refuse to grow up destroy men who love them. Individuation is her hero's journey. The doctrine of the mean keeps her from extremism. Legacy building is the final test. The red pill for women isn't bitterness, it's awakening. Discipline, symbolized by cold showers, shapes character. Financial wisdom ensures stewardship, not consumption. The transcendent function unifies opposites within the psyche. Acta, non-verba, deeds over words must govern all relationships. The narrow path is hard, but it leads home. If you're a man who wants more than a companion, if you want a co-architect of a dynasty, this book will show you how to recognize her, attract her, and deserve her. If you're a woman who wants to become that woman, this book will guide you into maturity, self-mastery, and purpose. This is not self-help fluff. This is field intelligence. This is battle-tested truth. Read it with eyes open. Apply it with courage. Ignore it at your peril. Unicorn women, high quality, low craziness, self-management, emotional rectification, virtue, femininity, maternal instincts, and low BPD. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.